Thanks very much, everyone, for coming and seeing this wonderful exhibit. And of course, before I do my introduction, I want to put in a plug for those of you who are interested in what you've seen thus far, or following this presentation decide you want to learn more. We have copies of the Oxford Project in our gift shop, reasonably priced. It's a paperback edition. It's just come out. Steve will be happy to sign copies, and I'm pleased to tell you that Mayor Don Saxon, the mayor of Oxford, Iowa, is here. Holly Peschel, who is in the exhibit, is here, and I'm sure they'd be willing to sign the books for you as well. So that's the end of my commercial announcement, but if you are a member of the association, you do, of course, get your 10% discount as well. Well, our speaker tonight is Stephen G. Bloom. Steve is professor and Bessie Dutton Murray Professional Scholar of Journalism and Mass Communications at the University of Iowa, where he teaches narrative journalism and magazine reporting and writing, among other topics. Prior to joining the Iowa faculty in 1993, Steve was a staff writer at the Sacramento Bee, the San Jose Mercury News, the Los Angeles Times, and the Dallas Morning News. He was also a Brazilian correspondent for the Field News Services and national news editor at the Latin American Daily Post. Steve's work has also appeared in the Smithsonian Magazine, the New York Times Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and the Washington Post, and many other national publications, as well as on National Public Radio's All Things Considered. His nonfiction book, Postville, A Class of Cultures in the American Heartland, in Heartland America, excuse me, was published in September 2000. The book focuses on fundamental changes confronting that small, predominantly Lutheran Iowa town after 150 Lubavitcher Jews settled there, buying the local slaughterhouse and becoming the community's new power brokers. The book was a selection of the Book of the Month Club as well as the Quality Paperback Books Club. Postville, the book, is required reading in more than 150 college and university courses. A dramatic play inspired by the book is scheduled to debut in 2011. Steve's most recent book, Tears of a Mermaid, The Secret Story of Pearls, was published in November 2009. This nonfiction detective story chronicles the culture and economic and political saga of pearls, the world's first gem. Steve has been honored with the Iowa Author of the Year Award, as well as fellowships at the MacDowell Colony and the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. Now, in September 2008, Steve and photographer Peter Feldstein co-authored the Oxford Project, which is, of course, the subject of our exhibit, and examines life in Oxford, Iowa. Reviews and stories about the project have appeared in the New York Times, on ABC World News Tonight, CBS Sunday Morning, and in many other national publications. The book won the prestigious Alex Award from the American Library Association, as well as being named Gold Medal recipient for Outstanding Book of the Year from the Independent Publishers Association. Please help me welcome Stephen Bloom to the stage to talk about the Oxford Project.
Okay, I think we're gonna. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much for showing up on this very cold evening. What I want to do is give you a brief preview of the Oxford Project. Let me ask, is there anyone who here is from Oxford? Could you raise your hand? Okay. We've got 3 people. Okay. So what I want to do is sort of like a class at the University of Iowa. We've got a lot to do in the next 15 to 20 minutes. So let me start. Okay. Most of you, can we dim the lights a little bit? Can we do that, Jim? Okay. For those who don't know Peter Feldstein, Peter is a wonderful, weird and wacky colleague of mine. And Peter, in 1984, came up with a novel idea, which was to photograph every single person in the city of Oxford. Peter did not want to just interview the mayor, just interview the bank president. He wanted to interview every single person. The idea was, at first, stunning, because we don't usually look at a city that way. We look at a city as being filled with important people. And those are the people who are going to get photographed. The mayor gets photographed, the bank president gets photographed, maybe the city council gets photographed. Peter wanted to turn that autocratic notion on its head and make it very democratic. He wanted to interview every single person in town. Peter sent out flyers. He posted tag board all over town and said, "I want to take your picture." And the first question that people asked Peter was, "How much is it going to cost me?" Peter said, "Nothing. It's going to be for free." The idea in Peter's mind was that everyone is created equal. And so Peter began taking photographs. He didn't ask people to show up in their Sunday best. He didn't ask people to jump up and down. It was really over in a flash, just like that. Peter was able to photograph 673 people out of the 676 people who lived in Oxford. So everyone cooperated, save 3 people. And that was that. Peter had a show at the American Legion Hall, and people looked at each other's photographs. Peter put the negatives away, and 21 years later, Peter and I got to talking, and I asked Peter, "Hey, whatever happened to those photographs?" Peter said, "I've still got them. Some of them are scratched. They're in a file cabinet." I said, "What would happen if you would photograph the same people again?" Well, Peter said, "I don't know if I can do that. A lot of people have died. A lot of people have moved away." I said, "Yeah, but Peter, if 20% have died, 20% have moved away, that still leaves around 350 people. You can sense the excitement in my voice because I just knew in my bones, in my corpuscles of my blood, that this was a great story." And Peter said, "I'll do it." So Peter came back a week later with 6 photographs of people whose images he had captured 22 years ago. And he created diptychs, or pictures set right next to each other. And you could have scraped my jaw off the floor. I mean, people had changed, but people were the same. They were the same people, but they were different. 20 years is a lot. And Peter said, "You know, this is really pretty interesting. How would you like to interview these people? Because they have stories. A lot's happened in 20 years. Thus began the Oxford Project. So let me take you through a tour of Oxford. And first, let me show you, Peter's not here. Peter is caring for his brother who is ill, and Peter is actually in South Florida right now. So I'm going to be Peter and Steve put together for the next 15 minutes. Some of Peter's predecessors helped frame this project, and this is a project that was done by a photographer whose name is Mike Disfarmer. And Mike Disfarmer took photographs similarly to Peter of many people in his town, which was Heber Springs, Arkansas. And so this gives you an idea of of what Peter hoped to recreate. In fact, Peter really created something far different, and really, in a certain way, far more majestic. Okay, so these are the photographs. These are called contact sheets that were from 1984. Okay? And then this is the first of 100 photographs, a little bit more than 100 photographs, and 100 interviews that I did. Actually, Darrell Lindley has died. One of the interesting issues with oral history is you got to get people to talk, because ultimately people will not be around forever. And so we hope that in some kind of way, in perhaps 500 or 1,000 years from now, when we're not around, that someone will look at the Oxford Project and say, gee, this is what it was like to live in a small town, in a state, what was that state called, Iowa? In a country called the United States. Because generally, we live in a celebrity-driven environment. You know, we're not really interested in interviewing the local butcher, but I'm interested in interviewing that local butcher and giving us the privilege of seeing what his daily life is all like. It is like. You'll notice that, and I never used a tape recorder, by the way. I wrote all this stuff out longhand, the old-fashioned way. And you'll notice that there's a natural cadence or rhythm to how we talk as people. And so we'll just go through a couple of these. I'm not a man of few words, so we need to speed this along. But just look how Daryl talked to me. I shoot him, bleed him, then skin him. I do hogs, cattle, goats, buffalo, and sheep. I use a .22 Magnum. After I shoot them, I cut their throats. Hogs, I stick them underneath in their brisket. I have no idea where the brisket to a hog is, but I really love how Daryl describes it. And you'll notice that each of these stories, each of these stories has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a trajectory to these stories. What I tried to do was shrink wrap the stories. Interviews lasted anywhere from 20 minutes actually to 5 hours. And I just sort of took out all of the excess and got it down to its essential. And we'll just look at the bottom. I really love how Daryl ends this. I don't have a lot of disappointments. I wish I charged people more. Maybe then I'd have more people, I'd have more money now. This is sort of interesting. When Peter caught Calvin Colony in 1984, Calvin brought along his pet, a pet lion. And so we'll just read a little bit of this. I'm a plumber, but I'm also a diver for the county. I dive for drowning victims, hunting accidents, snowmobiles that go through the ice. It's black down there, and you're crawling through the logs. I probably pulled out 20 bodies since 1973. Jumping down a little bit. For the last 6 years, I've been going to a resort in Jamaica called Hedonism. On one beach, you have to have your bottoms on. On the other beach, you can't lay out unless you're naked. You'll see people having sex if you stay around long enough. All the alcohol you want is included in the price. It's a good time. You don't have to take many clothes. So there's a sense of rural humor. And also, there's really a sense of poignancy, I think, in Calvin. Look what he's covering. After all, here's a man who lays out on the beach at a club called Hedonism. We came across some amazing, fascinating stories. This is a very long story, but I'll just read a little bit of this. My mom left me at a church when I was 3. What she really means to say is my mom abandoned me when I was 3. She used to travel with the carnival, and the carnival ended up going broke in Iowa. When my mom and my stepfather had a hard day, they'd take it out on me. This cute little girl. So she left me at this church with our dog Freddie. There's Freddie, by the way. And she pinned a note to my shirt that said, "Please take care of her. We can't any longer." Freddie ran away and I got scared. I started crying. A couple heard me and called the police. They sent me to a foster home, which I hated. When I was 4 or 5, I moved to Blanche's place in Oxford. My favorite movie was Annie. I watched that over and over with Blanche. Well, of course her favorite movie was Annie. Little Orphan Annie. We'll just drop to the bottom. On my 18th birthday, my mother blew into town. She wanted us to go on the Montel Williams show and say how she really never wanted to give me up. She asked me to move in with her in Florida and start a new life. That didn't work out, so I came back to Des Moines, where I've been for 6 years. Okay, so what's she doing now? I met a guy from Honduras, and he didn't speak a lick of English. I got pregnant, then we broke up. After that, I really got into partying. I'd stay out till 3 or 4 in the morning. I liked drinking. I met another guy at a bar and got pregnant again. Now I live with the fathers of both my children and another guy. Nothing for me has been normal. So why should now be normal? Really interesting and poignant. And if you look at Brianna, there's really a poignancy. There's really almost a special spirituality that she emits. And you know, the idea with these are triptychs, 3 panels. The idea with these, and you will all see this, I think, when you look at the exhibition next door, is that you know, the images are arresting. You learn more about those who are photographed, those who make up those images, when you read the panel in the middle. And then you have a greater understanding for the people in panels 1 and 3. As you have a greater understanding, you go back to the narrative. You go back and forth and back and forth. And you really learn an awful lot about Brianna and about the 99 other people who are featured in the book. Hey, guess who this is? This is Blanche. Blanche was the foster mother. Blanche was the woman with whom Brianna watched Annie over and over and over again. But Blanche is different. To Blanche, Brianna was just one of 500 kids. I first heard about foster parenting when I was a waitress at the Red Garter. Don't you love that? A waitress at the Red Garter. I always liked babysitting, so I thought I'd give it a try. We started 41 years ago, and we've had 500 children live with us. I had one girl for 14 years, and others for just a couple of weeks. We used to take in newborn babies, but I quit because it was too hard to let them go. One girl I got when she was 3. Her mother was running with the carnival, and she left the girl and the dog on the church steps. Well, we know who that is. You'll be able to see both of those triptychs next door. Going right to the end, you turn their values around. For some it works, for others it don't. This is Jim Hoyt. I'm going to say Jim Hoyt. Jim Hoyt is an American hero. Jim Hoyt, as you'll see, Jim Hoyt died 2 weeks before the book came out, a year and a half ago. Jim was the last living of the first 4 American soldiers who liberated Buchenwald concentration camp. He has an horrific story that has never left him. You will read about that next door. This actually is at Buchenwald, and this is in honor of Jim. This was erected after Jim died. Here's a cowboy. Iowa has cowboys, and there's a cowboy who likes to ride bucking broncos at the rodeo. We can just talk very briefly about Joe Booth. Joe over here has a lot of bravado. He's a tough guy. I mean, after all, in 1984, I was in the top 10 of the United Rodeo Association in bareback riding. Joe Booth was what they called me. 22 years later, it looks like someone's let the air out of Joe. You know, you look at the hat, you look at the hat. They're the same, but they're very different. That's what time will do. Pat Henkelman. Pat Henkelman in 1984 was captured by Peter when she was coming back from the grocery store. And Pat said, "Peter, do you want me to put down the sack of groceries?" And Peter said, "No." Pat's leaning a little bit to the left in 1984. She's leaning a little bit more to the left in 2005. Pat's wearing the same shoes. I should say the same kind of shoes. She's updated with some different glasses. And Pat has a striking story to tell, and I'm going to allow you to experience that story for yourself next door. Just want to show you something that I really love about Pat. Right at the end of the interview, Pat said this to me. "There used to be a hat store in town. I wish it still was here. I love hats." This is Amber Carroll. Amber actually is the only interview I did over the phone. Amber lives in Memphis now. And I'll read you a couple, wow, what can happen, right? What can happen from an 8-year-old to a 30-year-old? And she says, I love purses, the kind that are large enough to carry a blow dryer in them. And I love shoes, especially high heels. If they're smoking hot, they can make a pair of jeans into a sexy outfit. And hats! I love hats too. So there's a connection. There's generation 1 and generation 3. There's a connection. Amber is a little bit like Pat. Different. But she's carrying on the heritage, the tradition, the legacy of women who like hats. Quintessential Iowa farmer. Quintessential Iowa outdoorsman. Adventurer. This is Joe Primick. In the book, you'll see 2 of Joe Primick's daughters interviewed. And, I love this. I'll read you just a little bit. I do a lot of bow hunting. I take a shower, a bath, then I use human scent neutralizer. Let me just stop right here. Usually you take a shower to get rid of odor, okay? But he takes it so that no deer will be able to pick up any scent. I wash my clothes and stuff that makes them smell like dirt. We usually take a shower to get rid of the dirt, okay? Then I douse myself with buck urine. I got $450 worth of camouflage clothing. I go up 20 feet in a tree, sit there for 4 or 5 hours. Hell, sometimes it's longer. I start in the morning. When it's dark, I take a pop and coffee, maybe a few pieces of candy, sometimes a turkey or ham sandwich. If you gotta pee, you do it in a milk bottle. Well, that came from my question. I said, well, Joe, if you take pop or coffee and you're up there for 4 or 5 hours, what do you do? Here's a woman who used to work in a strip club in Phoenix called the Kitty Cat. She was a good pole dancer, she says. This is her father. Her father's the preacher in town. He used to be a buckskinner. He was a reenactor. He used to shoot muzzle-loaded rifles, throwing knives and tomahawks. He was obsessed with coon hunting. It wasn't about the kill, it was the chase. And now what we see is he's still involved with the chase. And he talks about that. He talks about founding a church called Anchored in Faith. He's done more than 100 baptisms. He does them in a horse tank. I want to also note that the year 2028 will be when Jesus returns, so says Pastor Hahn, excuse me. I may be off by a year or 2, but I believe it'll be around then when the resurrection will take place. It seems to me you need to be much more exacting. 2029, 2027, but that's his prediction. Very interesting. Barb Boyle. Sage and Zeus are Great Pyrenees. They've been abused and dumped. I took 4 weeks to catch them. I used another Great Pyrenees as bait. I lay flat on my back with treats in both hands. To this day, I can't get them into a pickup truck. If I try, they go crazy. They're terrified of men, especially men in seed caps. Reggie is the alpha dog. He'll back Sage and Zeus into a corner. Then we find out that my mother was 16 when I was born. She had her pregnancy by wearing baggy clothes. One night, under a full blue moon, she went to a park and delivered me by herself. Wow, what a story she's got. And I'll let you read the rest of the triptych next door. Ultimately, she does find her family. She does find her brother. But really what we find is that this is her family. This is the family that has girded her, that has protected her. Okay. Another interesting story, my Don't We Change. Another interesting story, I love this. I'm the black sheep of the family. I read everything I could get my hands on. I still get a lot of grief for having a college degree. Interesting. Part of the legacy of some small towns in Iowa. He gets grief for having gone to college. Here's Hunter Tandy, sort of a cute, goofy kid at age 8, wearing "Give Me a Break" on his t-shirt, to an enigmatic, morose 30-year-old. Kathy Tandy describes an up and down battle with weight. It's interesting. There's a bunch of wisdom and maturity that Kathy now absolutely radiates, which she did not have, I think, in 1984. Another interesting story, very interesting story. This happens to be the butcher's granddaughter. The butcher is Darrell Lindley, who I introduced you to right in the beginning. Here's a man who says, "I've been called Frank Sinatra. People think I look like him." Notice how this guy is standing exactly the same. And no one prompted him. Okay? I like this. One of the things the Oxford Project has taught me is that life is made up of moments. And one of Tim's moments, perhaps the pivotal moment in his entire life, was this. On the way home one day, I stopped in at Slim's, and that's where I met Robin. Today we have 2 girls, ages 16 and 13. Tim always wanted to go to college in Hawaii. That was his plan. He got a job doing construction to save up enough money. He says to me, I feel like George Bailey, the Jimmy Stewart character in It's a Wonderful Life. That trip to Hawaii was my ticket out. Okay, I just want to show you 1 or 2 more, then I'll let you go to wander the streets of Oxford, right next door in the Hoover Museum and Library. Interesting what can happen. And that's it. I welcome your interest in the Oxford Project. It really isn't a story about Oxford. It's a story about us. Thank you very much.